In the shadow of the Capitoline Hill, a different kind of battle unfolds. Not one of swords and shields, but of cunning and desire. Kaeso, a gladiator whose scarred body tells stories of survival, slips through Rome's moonlit streets on a mission far more dangerous than the arena. Livia Valeria, daughter of patrician blood, stands to lose everything to a guardian's greed. Desperate, she seeks the one man who navigates the underworld as skillfully as he navigates the sands of combat. Her offer is unprecedented, his freedom for her treasures. But beneath the transaction lies a challenge that awakens something long dormant in the gladiator's heart. As Kaeso infiltrates the highest echelons of Roman society, the line between thief and savior blurs. Can a man who fights for others' entertainment dare to fight for his own happiness? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sweat stung Kaeso's eyes as he deflected another blow from Jabari's wooden practice sword. The Numidian was quick, but predictable in his third attack. Kaeso sidestepped, swept his training gladius in a practiced arc, and tapped his opponent's ribs. "Dead," he said quietly. Jabari grinned, white teeth flashing in his dark face. "Only because I let you live yesterday." From the edge of the practice yard, Doctor's voice cut through the grunts and clatter of training. "Again, faster this time. The mob doesn't pay to watch dancers." The ludus of Titus Crispus was modest by Rome's standards. A converted warehouse near the Tiber, courtyard flanked by cramped sleeping cells, all surrounded by walls topped with iron spikes. Not to keep enemies out, but gladiators in. Kaeso and Jabari reset their positions, wooden weapons at ready. Across the yard, other pairs practiced, Thracians with curved sicas, Retiarii with tridents and nets, Myrmilones with their heavy shields. Among them stalked Brutus, Crispus's champion, observing Kaeso with undisguised contempt. "He fears you," whispered Jabari as they circled. "Your last victory stole his acclaim." "Fear makes men dangerous," Kaeso replied, launching into a flurry of strikes that drove Jabari backward. Doctor approached, leather scourge coiled at his belt. The retired gladiator's body was a map of scars, his left eye milky white from an old wound. He slapped the wooden gladius Kaeso gripped. "You fight with your head, not your heart. Good for survival, bad for spectacle." His voice lowered. Crispus noticed. "He says you lack bloodlust." "I kill when necessary. In the arena, it's always necessary." Doctor's good eye held Kaeso's. "Unless you find another way out." The meaningful look wasn't lost on Kaeso. Many gladiators dreamed of purchasing freedom. Few accumulated the substantial sum required. Fewer still survived long enough to spend it. Evening brought the ludus's meager meal, barley porridge, dried figs, watered wine. Kaeso ate methodically, seated beside Jabari on a stone bench. His mind replayed the noblewoman's proposition while his fingers traced the grain of his wooden practice sword, worn smooth from years of use. "Your thoughts are elsewhere," observed Jabari. "The gods of the arena punish distraction." Before Kaeso could respond, a shadow fell across them. Lanista Crispus, a corpulent man whose soft body belied a merciless business mind, loomed over their bench. "My Sam Knight shows insufficient enthusiasm today," Crispus said, addressing Doctor but staring at Kaeso. "Perhaps he needs motivation for the upcoming festival games." Kaeso lowered his gaze appropriately. "My apologies, Dominus. I'll improve." "See that you do. Your next opponent comes from Macros Ludus. They're wagering heavily." Crispus's fleshy lips curled. "I'd hate to lose money on my investment." After the Lanista departed, Jabari whispered, "Macros fighters are brutal. They say he feeds them bull's blood and raw meat." "Superstition," Kaeso murmured, though concern flickered in his chest. Night descended. Guards made their rounds, torchlight sweeping the cells. When silence finally settled over the ludus, Kaeso waited, counting his heartbeats. Then, from beneath his thin palate, he retrieved a slender metal rod. The hypogeum, a network of narrow tunnels beneath the ludus used for drainage and storage, had become Kaeso's secret pathway to freedom, if only temporarily. He discovered the loose stone in his cell floor 3 years prior, kept it hidden through countless inspections. Silently, he slid the stone aside and lowered himself into darkness. The tunnel smell of damp earth and decay, but also possibility. Tonight, he would begin tracing a route to Galba's Domus, mapping the underground passageways in his mind. As he navigated the familiar turns, Kaeso reflected on his 5 years since entering these walls. False accusations of theft from a senator's home had earned him damnatio ad ludos, condemnation to the games. Now, ironically, thievery might be his salvation. The wooden practice sword tucked into his belt reminded him of dual identities: gladiator by day, thief by night, both roles imposed by Rome's unyielding social order. Both roles he'd mastered to survive, and perhaps, finally, to escape. The amphora was heavier than it needed to be, filled with Falernian wine from Campania, a gift from merchant Lucius Atticus to Praetor Galba. Kaeso, dressed in a simple brown tunic with the merchant's insignia, followed the lead porter through the atrium of Galba's Domus. His eyes, downcast in proper slave posture, missed nothing. For guards at the entrance, mosaic floor, no silent approach possible. Central impluvium with decorative but functional iron grating, too narrow for access. Wait here, the lead porter instructed, leaving Kaeso in a side chamber while he sought the household steward. Alone, Kaeso's gaze darted efficiently, memorizing details. The chamber connected to a peristyle garden through an archway, beyond which lay the private quarters. 2 household slaves worked nearby, old men unlikely to question a delivery assistant. He set down the amphora and extracted a folded scrap of papyrus, pretending to check delivery details while sketching the layout with a small piece of charcoal. Years of observation had taught him that the most valuable possessions in any Roman home were kept in 2 locations: the master's tablinum for documents and a secured cubiculum for valuables. A commotion at the entrance drew his attention. A litter arrived, accompanied by lictors bearing the fasces, bundles of rods symbolizing magisterial authority. From the litter emerged a corpulent man in a toga bordered with the broad purple stripe of senatorial rank. Senator Longinus, announced a servant. So this was Livia's intended husband. Kaeso studied him from beneath lowered brows, jowls quivering as he barked orders, fingers adorned with gaudy gold rings, eyes small and calculating in his fleshy face. "The praetor expects me," Longinus declared, striding past servants who bowed deferentially. Kaeso drifted casually toward an adjacent chamber as a steward led Longinus to what must be Galba's tablinum. Position himself near the doorway, Kaeso adjusted the amphora, appearing to struggle with its weight while straining to hear the conversation within. "The girl remains obstinate," came Galba's voice, tight with irritation. "Claims she must honor her father's memory with proper time." "Time benefits neither of us," Longinus replied. "The grain shipments from Egypt arrive next month. I need those shipping contracts her father controlled. The contracts transfer upon her marriage. Everything is arranged." "And the ledgers?" A pause. "Secure. Though there was a disturbance last night. A slave claimed to see someone on the roof. Probably cats or shadows." Kaeso's muscles tensed. Someone else was watching the house. "Increase the guards," Longinus said. "Those ledgers mustn't be examined by anyone. The annotations could prove problematic. No one will see them. After the marriage, they can conveniently disappear in a household accident. A fire, perhaps." Laughter, cold and conspiratorial. The steward's return forced Kaeso to resume his porter duties. He followed the man to the home's rear quarters, where wine was stored in a cool room adjacent to the kitchen. The brief tour revealed 2 crucial details: the location of Galba's private sleeping chamber with its reinforced door and the household routine. Guards changed at the calling of each watch, with fewer men during midday when Galba attended to his praetor duties in the forum. As Kaeso exited through the servants' entrance, a towering Germanic guard fixed him with a suspicious stare. The man's pale eyes narrowed, hand moving to the gladius at his belt. "You, wine boy, haven't seen you before." "First delivery to this house, Domini," Kaeso replied, eyes downcast, voice servile. An honor to serve the praetor's household. The guard grunted, unconvinced but unwilling to create issue over a slave. Kaeso felt the man's gaze burning into his back as he departed. Hours later, in the temple of Vesta's shadow, Kaeso unfolded his crude map for Livia. The jewels will be in his sleeping chamber, the ledgers in his study. He pointed to marked locations, both heavily secured. Can you access them? She asked, studying the sketch. Yes, but there's something else. Kaeso described the conversation he'd overheard. They specifically mentioned annotations in the ledgers. Whatever your father recorded, they fear it. Livia's eyes widened. Then it's not just my dowry they want controlled. It's something my father knew. Her fingers traced the map thoughtfully. When can you attempt the retrieval? 3 days. During the midday Senate session. Galba will be absent. The guard change creates confusion. He hesitated. There's one guard, a Germanic tribesman. He noticed me. Alaric, Livia nodded. My father's former bodyguard. Now Galba's creature. He's dangerous, Kaeso. Trust nothing about him. Their eyes met in mutual understanding. The stakes had just grown higher, beyond stolen treasures to potential treason. Beyond a simple heist to a matter of life and death. 3 days, Kaeso confirmed, committing himself to a path that could end at either freedom or the cross. The Subura district crawled with life even in darkness. Tenements leaned precariously over narrow streets where vendors hawked questionable food, cheap wine, and companionship. Kaeso moved through the throng like a shadow, hood drawn against the drizzling rain that turned Rome's dirt streets to mud. The stench of humanity, sweat, waste, desperation, hung in the humid air. In his palm, he clutched a bronze token bearing an owl insignia, his passage to Rome's underworld. The thermopolium on the corner served more than hot drinks and simple meals. Kaeso slipped past the counter where a heavy-set woman ladled broth into clay cups, through a curtained doorway, and down narrow stairs. 2 burly men guarded a second curtain. He displayed the token wordlessly. Weapons? One guard grunted. Kaeso surrendered a small knife, keeping the lock picks hidden in his belt, and ducked into a low-ceilinged room hazed with smoke from oil lamps. The space hummed with murmured conversations between Rome's nocturnal operators. Loan sharks, smugglers, fences, informants, and thieves. Casca occupied his usual corner table. The fence was a withered Greek, bald except for tufts of white hair behind his ears, with calculating eyes that had survived 6 decades in Rome's shadows. He smirked at Kaeso's approach. The Samnite graces my humble establishment. Does your Lanista know his prize fighter moonlights among the disreputable? What Crispus doesn't know sustains us both. Kaeso settled opposite him. I need information. Information costs more than wine, my friend. Casca sipped from a tarnished silver cup. What variety interests you? Praetor Galba's household. Security rotations, vault mechanisms, domestic routines. The old man's eyebrows rose. Ambitious. Last man who crossed a praetor decorated a cross on the Appian Way for 3 weeks before the crows finished him. I'm not crossing him, just liberating specific items. Semantics mean little to Roman justice. Casca leaned forward. Why should I risk my network on your suicide mission? Kaeso placed a small pouch on the table. The coins inside, from Livia's advance and his own meager savings, represented years of carefully hoarded arena winnings. Casca weighed it in his palm, frowning. Insufficient for such danger. There's more upon completion. Dead men pay poor commissions. Casca's voice softened with unexpected concern. What drives you to this, Kaeso? You've been cautious for years. Freedom, Kaeso replied simply. The old fence studied him, then nodded almost imperceptibly. Wait here. When Casca returned, a woman accompanied him, middle-aged, plain-featured, with the calloused hands and stooped posture of household servitude. This is Naivia, Casca introduced. She washes laundry for several patrician households, including Galba's. The woman's shrewd eyes assessed Kaeso. You're the gladiator who spared the Carthaginian last summer. My sister attended those games. Kaeso inclined his head, waiting. Galba employs 16 household slaves, for freedmen servants and 8 guards, including the German, Alaric, who answers only to the master, she reported methodically. The vault beneath the tablinum floor requires 2 keys. One Galba wears always, the second kept in a puzzle box in his sleeping chamber. Kaeso absorbed this, recognizing the complexity of his task multiplying. Can you provide any details on the interior layout? Better. She gestured, and Casca produced a scrap of parchment showing rough sketches of the domus floor plan. Wastewater channels run beneath the atrium, connecting to the main sewer, large enough for a man, if he doesn't mind the filth. Your price? Kaeso asked. My sister was taken for Galba's pleasure last year. She died after he was finished with her. Naivia's face hardened. I want no money. I want him ruined. Kaeso exchanged glances with Casca, understanding the deeper currents now. I can't promise his downfall. Then promise to try, she replied fiercely. As their meeting concluded, Casca pulled Kaeso aside. Rumors circulate about you. Macro, the lanista from the Ludus Magnus, offers substantial coin for information on your movements. He seeks to acquire you for his stable. I'm Crispus's property, Kaeso said flatly. Ownership changes with sufficient motivation. Be cautious. Macro's men watched the Ludus. Walking back through the Subura's labyrinthine alleys, Kaeso felt Rome's invisible web tightening around him. The bronze token weighed heavy in his palm, a reminder that in this city, everyone belonged to someone else's network. The night sky lightened imperceptibly as he approached the drainage tunnel that would return him to the Ludus. Dawn approached, and with it, another day of practiced violence while his mind calculated angles of a different, more dangerous game. Sand gritted between Kaeso's teeth as he circled his opponent. The Thracian, a muscular brute with a wicked curved sicca and small rectangular shield, pressed forward relentlessly. Midday sun beat down on the Circus Maximus, transforming the arena into a furnace of noise, heat, and impending violence. 20,000 Romans roared, their collective bloodlust hanging in the air like a physical presence. The mob didn't care about technique or strategy. They wanted spectacle, suffering, and eventual death. Somewhere among them sat Crispus, calculating the odds and potential profit from his fighting property. The Thracian lunged, sicca slicing where Kaeso's throat had been a heartbeat earlier. Kaeso deflected with his rectangular scutum shield, creating an opening. His gladius thrust forward in a controlled strike, drawing first blood across his opponent's ribs, enough to excite the crowd without ending the contest prematurely. Finish him! Someone screamed from the stands. Kaeso ignored the call, maintaining disciplined distance. He'd learned long ago that survival came not from wild aggression but calculated patience. Each movement served a purpose. Conserve energy, create openings, identify weaknesses. From the shaded imperial box, privileged spectators watched. Kaeso caught a glimpse of purple-bordered togas, senators enjoying the games. Among them sat Praetor Galba, corpulent and sweating in the heat. Beside him, a slender female figure whose bearing marked her as patrician even from a distance. Livia. The momentary distraction nearly cost him his life. The Thracian sicca slashed across his shoulder, drawing a line of fire and blood. The crowd erupted in approval at the sight of crimson staining the sand. Doctor's training voice echoed in Kaeso's mind. The arena forgives no lapse in attention. Refocusing, Kaeso adopted the classic Samnite fighting stance, shield forward, sword poised. The Thracian, encouraged by his successful strike, pressed his advantage with a flurry of attacks. Kaeso gave ground deliberately, letting his opponent expend energy in the heat. 3 exchanges later, the Thracian's breathing grew labored. His attacks slowed imperceptibly. Kaeso saw the minute drop in his opponent's shield position, the opportunity he'd been waiting for. With explosive speed that belied his methodical approach, Kaeso surged forward. His shield bashed the Thracian's smaller one aside. His gladius found the narrow gap between bronze breastplate and leather belt. The blade sank, not deeply enough to kill, but sufficient to incapacitate. The Thracian fell to his knees, blood streaming down his leg. His weapon dropped to the sand in surrender. The editor of the games rose, thumb extended horizontally. The crowd's chant built, some for death, others for mercy. The balance would determine the Thracian's fate. Kaeso stood immobile, gladius poised, awaiting the verdict. His gaze drifted to the imperial box, finding Livia's face among the aristocracy. Something unspoken passed between them across the gulf of sand and social strata. The editor's thumb turned upward. Life granted. Relief flickered across Kaeso's features as attendants helped the wounded Thracian from the arena. The crowd's reaction was mixed. Bloodthirsty spectators booed, while others applauded the skill displayed. Kaeso raised his gladius in salute to the editor, then to the four corners of the arena, playing his role in the spectacle of Roman justice and entertainment. As he exited through the Porta Libitinaria, the gate through which both victors and slain were removed, Lanista Crispus intercepted him. Efficient but uninspiring, Crispus criticized, his merchant's eyes calculating profit against performance. The crowd pays for blood and drama, not technical perfection. He lives to fight another day. As do I, Kaeso replied, accepting a water flask from a slave. Your next opponent won't be so easily dispatched. Macro's champion is undefeated in 30 matches. Crispus's fleshy face creased with concern for his investment. Something distracts you, Sam Knight. Resolve it, or your next fight may be your last. As Crispus waddled away, Kaeso caught sight of Livia departing with her entourage. For the briefest moment, her gaze found his across the crowded staging area. Her chin inclined slightly, acknowledgement, perhaps even approval. More dangerously, Senator Longinus stood nearby, his small eyes tracking the exchange with sudden interest. Kaeso turned away, accepting the blood-stained laurel crown from a Ludus slave. Victory in the arena had never felt so hollow, nor so complicated by the invisible battles occurring beyond the sand. Dawn mist clung to the stones of the aqueduct where Rome's launderers gathered to ply their trade. Women knelt at the public basins, pounding tunics and togas against the smooth stone. Their hands reddened from lye soap and cold water. Their chatter created a curtain of sound behind which secrets could be exchanged. Kaeso approached with head bowed, a cloth bundle under his arm, the disguise of a household slave delivering laundry. Naivia worked alone at the end basin, her methodical movements belying the sharp intelligence in her eyes. She acknowledged him with the barest nod. You risk much coming here in daylight, she murmured, continuing to scrub a patrician's toga. Night brings its own dangers. Kaeso set down his bundle and knelt as if examining the washing. Between them lay her marking stylus, a simple wooden implement used to identify household laundry, now their excuse for conversation. Galba's household follows strict routines, she began, voice barely audible above the splashing and chattering. The praetor rises at first light, conducts business in his tablinum until midday, then departs for the forum. He returns after the 9th hour, dines, and retires to his sleeping chamber. The ledgers and jewels, where are they kept? Separated. Naivia wrung water from the toga with practiced efficiency. The family jewels rest in a locked chest in his sleeping chamber. The ledgers he keeps closer. They never leave his tablinum except when he consults them, which he does frequently. This complicated matters. Kaeso had hoped to retrieve both in a single intrusion. Does he refer to specific parts of the ledgers? The final entries. Your lady's father made annotations in the margins during his last days. Naivia's hands stilled momentarily. Galba grows agitated when reading them. Twice I've heard him consulting with Senator Longinus about ensuring the records are controlled. Guards. For during the day, 6 at night. They rotate at the calling of each watch. She lowered her voice further. But Alaric is the one to fear. The German never seems to sleep. His loyalty was purchased with blood and gold. How so? He was your lady's father's man originally. Something changed in the final weeks before the master's death. Galba gave him a villa in Campania and a purse of gold. Now he serves Galba with the devotion of a hound. Her eyes met Kaeso's briefly. A hound that can smell deception. Kaeso processed this information. When would be the optimal time? 3 days hence. The household travels to attend a senatorial dinner at Longinus's villa. Only Alaric and 2 guards will remain. She pulled a small pouch from her belt. Crushed seeds of the poppy. Mix with wine for the guards. Alaric drinks only water. As Kaeso reached for the pouch, Naivia's hand closed over his wrist with surprising strength. My sister was 16 when Galba took her into his household. A virgin. He returned her broken in body and spirit. She died by her own hand a month later. The raw hatred in her eyes matched anything Kaeso had witnessed in the arena. I don't seek just theft, Gladiator. I seek justice. Justice is for the patricians, Kaeso replied carefully. People like us can hope only for survival. Then survival for you, ruin for him. She released his wrist. The ledgers contain something that terrifies him. Something worth killing to protect. Their conversation concluded with details of the household layout, which sleeping chambers were occupied, which entrance would be least monitored during the dinner absence, how the lock mechanisms on the tablinum cabinets functioned. As Kaeso prepared to leave, Naivia offered one final warning. There are whispers among the household slaves. Galba intends to accelerate the marriage. Documents are being prepared for a ceremony before the month ends. The urgency of his task crystallized. The window for action was narrowing rapidly. If you succeed, Naivia said, eyes returning to her washing. Remember my sister's name was Drusilla. Honor her by ensuring Galba pays for his crimes. Kaeso nodded once, committing the name to memory. Another debt in a life already heavily mortgaged. He departed as he had arrived, anonymous among Rome's teeming masses, carrying a burden heavier than any training armor doctor had ever assigned. Behind him, Naivia continued her scrubbing, the stylus marking each garment with its owner's designation, the visible system that maintained order in a world where true justice remained elusive for those born without privilege. Metal scraped against metal as Kaeso manipulated the crude lock picks. Before him sat a clay model of a Roman vault lock, simplified but functional, with internal pins that required precise alignment. His fingers, calloused from years of weapons training, worked with surprising delicacy. Almost, he muttered to himself. The final pin clicked into place. The mock lock turned. Dawn approached, stealing the darkness that had concealed his night's activities. Soon Doctor would sound the horn for morning training. Kaeso quickly disassembled the practice lock, hiding the components and his tools beneath a loose stone in his cell floor. Sleep had become a luxury he could ill afford. Days were consumed by increasingly brutal training for his upcoming match against Macros champion. Nights were devoted to preparations for the heist, studying Naivia's information, practicing the necessary skills, and mentally mapping every potential complication. The training yard erupted with activity as gladiators assembled for morning exercises. Doctor stood center, scourge in hand, barking commands that set men running, lifting weighted swords, and driving wooden posts into the packed earth. Faster! Doctor demanded as Kaeso completed his 30th circuit of the yard. Macros Gaul won't grant you rest when your lungs burn. Beside him, Jabari matched his pace, voice low beneath their labored breathing. Something occupies your thoughts, brother. Your eyes see beyond these walls. Kaeso had shared nothing of his plans with his friend, protecting him from complicity. Yet Jabari's perception was keen, honed by years of survival. Focus only on your training, Kaeso advised. Crispus increases the wagers on our matches. Jabari's laugh held no humor. Coin will never touch. After a pause, he added, if you seek escape, I can create diversion. The night watch drinks heavily when supervisors sleep. Kaeso stopped mid-stride, studying the Numidian's earnest expression. Trust was a luxury in the Ludus, yet here it was freely offered. Why would you risk punishment? Because one day, I too will need assistance. Jabari shrugged. We die regardless, in the arena for others' entertainment, or on the cross for defiance. At least defiance is our choice. Their conversation ended as Doctor approached, but understanding had been established. Kaeso had found an unexpected ally. Afternoon brought weapons training. Kaeso faced Brutus, the Ludus champion, whose resentment had festered since Kaeso's growing popularity with the crowds. Their wooden practice swords clashed with enough force to splinter. Crispus says you'll face the Gaul next week, Brutus taunted between strikes. They call him the Bone Breaker. 40 men dead beneath his sword. Kaeso responded with a technique shift, moving from Samnite to Thracian-style mid-attack, catching Brutus off guard. The champion stumbled, nearly falling. Impressive, came Doctor's voice from behind them. Where did you learn that transition? Observation, Kaeso replied, stepping back. Each fighting style has advantages. Why limit oneself? Why indeed? Doctor's remaining, I studied him with uncomfortable intensity. Continue. Night brought no rest. After the Ludus quieted, Kaeso slipped through his hidden passage into the hypogeum tunnels. Tonight's objective: practice scaling the exterior walls without rope, a skill essential for accessing Galba's domus through the route he'd identified. The ancient service tunnels eventually connected to Rome's vast sewer system, the Cloaca Maxima. The stench was overwhelming, but the darkness provided perfect conditions for honing night vision. Navigating by touch and memory, Kaeso found his exit point, a drainage opening near the Ludus's rear wall. Emerging into moonlight, he began his ascent of the Ludus's exterior, finding minute handholds in the weathered stone, testing each before committing his weight. Halfway up, torchlight swept the ground below, guards making their rounds. Kaeso froze, pressed against the wall, controlling his breathing as the light passed beneath him. One guard paused, perhaps sensing something amiss. Kaeso remained motionless, muscles burning with the effort of maintaining his position. After an eternity, the guard moved on. Kaeso resumed his climb, reaching the roof's edge where he pulled himself over with fluid grace, a movement practiced countless times in childhood, when survival had first demanded stealth and agility. As he caught his breath on the roof, a fluttering piece of parchment caught his eye, a message wedged beneath a loose tile. Opening it revealed a child's rough writing. Marriage ceremony preparations begun. 7 days. Time was running out. The heist couldn't wait for the senatorial dinner. It would have to be tomorrow night, ready or not. Darkness enveloped Rome as Kaeso moved through the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer that served as the city's intestines. Rats scattered before him. The specialized oil lamp he carried, designed with an adjustable flame and shuttered sides, provided just enough illumination to navigate without betraying his presence to any watching from drainage grates above. Jabari had fulfilled his promise of distraction, starting a controlled fire in the Ludus kitchen that drew all attention away from the hypogeum entrance. Kaeso had slipped away in the confusion, knowing his absence wouldn't be discovered until morning roll call, if he survived that long. Following Naivia's directions, he counted intersections in the fetid tunnel until reaching the access point nearest Galba's domus. Here, the ancient sewer connected to a newer drainage channel serving the wealthy homes on the Palatine. The passage narrowed, forcing him to crawl the final distance, emerging through a decorative fountain drain in a garden adjacent to Galba's property. Rain had begun to fall, a blessing that drove even diligent guards to seek shelter in doorways rather than patrolling exposed areas. Kaeso extinguished his lamp and waited, counting heartbeats as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. The garden wall separating the properties posed little challenge to a man who had scaled the Ludus's higher barriers. Finding purchase on ornamental stonework, Kaeso ascended and traversed the narrow top, dropping silently into Galba's peristyle garden. He pressed himself against a column as a guard passed, the man's attention focused on staying dry rather than securing the premises. When the guard rounded the corner, Kaeso darted across the open space to the tablinum window. The wooden shutters yielded to his thin blade, allowing him to slip inside Galba's private office. Here, surrounded by symbols of Roman authority and wealth, Kaeso felt the weight of his transgression. Not merely theft, but violation of a magistrate's imperium. a capital offense regardless of justification. The adjustable lamp provided minimal illumination as he searched for the ledgers. Galba's meticulous organization worked in Kaeso's favor. The family accounts were stored in a locked cabinet precisely where Naivia had indicated. The lock surrendered to his picks after tense moments of manipulation. Inside, leather-bound tablets contained generations of the Valerian family's financial records. Kaeso identified Livia's father's hand in the recent entries, precise, educated script befitting a patrician. More interesting were the marginal notes made in the final pages, written in a shakier hand during Marcus Valerius's last days. Cryptic references to grain discrepancies and ostia manifests, followed by amounts and names. Securing the ledgers in the waterproof satchel he'd brought, Kaeso turned his attention to the second objective, Livia's jewels. These would be in Galba's sleeping chamber across the atrium. As he prepared to exit the tablinum, voices approached, servants returning earlier than expected from the evening's engagements. Kaeso retreated behind a heavy curtain as a household slave entered, lighting additional lamps. "The master returns within the hour," the slave informed another. "Senator Longinus accompanies him to finalize the marriage contract." "So soon? The Lady Livia hasn't even been informed. She'll know when she needs to know. Prepare her chamber for the marriage inspection." Their casual cruelty, discussing a woman's fate as though arranging furniture, reinforced Kaeso's resolve. When they departed, he moved swiftly across the atrium toward the private quarters. Galba's sleeping chamber featured more substantial security, a heavy door with an imported Greek lock mechanism. Kaeso's specialized pick strained against the sophisticated device. Just as the final tumbler clicked into place, a sound behind him froze his blood. An interesting choice of evening activity for a gladiator. Kaeso turned slowly to face Alaric, the Germanic guard. The massive man stood blocking the hallway, sword drawn but alarm not yet raised. "I wondered who would attempt this," Alaric continued conversationally. "Galba predicted someone might try to recover the Valerian treasures. I expected hired thugs, not a celebrated arena fighter." Kaeso's mind raced through options, none favorable. Fighting would create noise, alerting others. Running meant abandoning half his objective. "The Lady Livia deserves her inheritance," Kaeso ventured, assessing whether negotiation might be possible. Something unreadable flickered across Alaric's face. Her father thought so too. He hesitated, then spoke words Kaeso never expected. "You have minutes, not hours. Get what you came for." Bewildered but seizing the opportunity, Kaeso slipped into the chamber. Inside, he quickly located the jewel chest, finding it unlocked, as though someone had recently accessed it. The family jewels were impressive, gold necklaces set with pearls, rings bearing the Valerian seal, earrings of Egyptian design. Kaeso secured them alongside the ledgers. When he emerged, Alaric remained in position. North garden wall. No guards for the next 10 minutes. His eyes held Kaeso's. "Tell her." Her father's last words were of her. Before Kaeso could respond, shouting erupted from the entrance. Galba had returned early. Alaric's hand closed around Kaeso's arm, propelling him toward an alcove. "Go. Now." Temple ruins on the Aventine Hill stood, sentinel against the night sky, columns like pale fingers reaching toward the stars. Kaeso arrived first, soaked from rain and sewer filth, the precious satchel protected beneath his cloak. The abandoned shrine to some forgotten deity offered shelter from both elements and prying eyes. He placed the oil lamp in a niche where its light wouldn't betray their presence to passing patrols. Rain drummed on the partial roof, creating a curtain of water around the temple's perimeter, nature's additional protection for their clandestine meeting. Footsteps approached, measured and deliberate. Kaeso's hand moved to his concealed dagger before Livia's slender form emerged from the darkness, wrapped in a plain cloak that disguised her patrician bearing. Her face, partially hidden by a hood, revealed nothing of her emotions. "You succeeded," she said, not quite a question. "At considerable risk," Kaeso replied, indicating the satchel. "Your inheritance, as promised." Livia approached cautiously, rain beating on her woolen cloak. When she reached for the satchel, her fingers trembled slightly, the only indication of her inner turmoil. She opened it first to the jewelry case, breath-catching as she lifted a gold pendant set with pearls. My mother's necklace. Her voice softened with memory. She wore this the day she died, bringing my brother into the world. Both gone in a single afternoon. The intimacy of the moment made Kaeso uncomfortable. This was supposed to be a transaction, not a confidence. The ledgers are beneath, he directed, businesslike. I glimpsed unusual notations in your father's hand. Setting aside the jewelry with reluctance, Livia extracted the bound tablets. She moved closer to the lamp, fingers tracing her father's handwriting with reverence. As she turned to the final entries, her expression changed from nostalgia to confusion, then dawning comprehension. These shipping manifests. She pointed to columns of figures. They don't match the official records. Kaeso looked over her shoulder, close enough to catch the scent of rosewater beneath the rain on her skin. What significance? My father oversaw grain shipments from Egypt, Rome's lifeline. These show systematic discrepancies. Her finger traced the annotations. 3,000 modii reported but only 2,000 delivered. Repeated across dozens of shipments. Theft on a massive scale, Kaeso realized. With Senate funds paid for phantom grain. Livia turned pages, revealing more annotations. My father was documenting it all, names, dates, amounts. Senator Longinus appears repeatedly, as does Galba. She looked up, eyes bright with understanding. This isn't just about my dowry. It's about silencing evidence of corruption. Evidence that could destroy them both if presented to the emperor. Kaeso added, the full implications becoming clear. My father didn't die of fever. Livia's voice hardened. These final entries are dated the day before his illness began. The rain intensified, drumming against stone like martial drums. In that rhythmic backdrop, Kaeso recounted his unexpected encounter with Alaric. He helped me escape, asked me to tell you your father's last words were of you. Tears welled in Livia's eyes, quickly blinked away. Alaric was loyal to my father for 15 years. I never understood his betrayal. Perhaps it wasn't betrayal but survival, Kaeso suggested. To remain close, to help when opportunity arose. Their eyes met in the lamp's glow, mutual understanding deepening. This was no longer merely about stolen treasures and purchased freedom. They had uncovered conspiracy reaching into the highest levels of Roman governance. Livia closed the ledgers with newfound resolve. These must reach the urban prefect, the only magistrate with authority to prosecute a praetor. But Galba will realize their absence by morning. The city gates will be watched. I must return to the Ludus before dawn or face crucifixion as a fugitive, Kaeso reminded her. Freedom suddenly seemed further away, not closer. Then we hide these until after your match against Macros champion. I'll secure them where Galba won't think to look. She hesitated, then impulsively removed her mother's necklace from the case. Take this. Insurance that I'll honor our arrangement. As she placed it in his palm, her fingers lingered against his callous skin. Unexpected tenderness that startled them both. For a heartbeat, they were not gladiator and noblewoman but simply a man and woman bound by dangerous knowledge and growing trust. 2 days, she whispered. Survive your match. Then we'll both claim our freedom. The moment passed as quickly as it had formed. Practicalities reasserted themselves, routes to take, precautions to observe, contingencies to plan. Yet something had fundamentally shifted between them, a complexity neither had anticipated when striking their initial bargain. Dawn broke over the Ludus with unusual commotion. Kaeso, who had returned barely an hour earlier through the hypogeum tunnels, feigned sleep as guards burst into the gladiator's cells for an unscheduled inspection. On your feet, the head guard barked. Lanista Crispus demands all fighters in the training yard. Now, exchanging glances with Jabari across the narrow corridor, Kaeso followed the stream of confused gladiators into the courtyard. There, an unexpected tableau awaited. Crispus, face flushed with either rage or excitement, stood beside a tall, lean man whose quality tunic and imperious bearing marked him as another lanista. Behind them loomed a giant of a man wearing a distinctive red cape, easily a head taller than the largest gladiator in Crispus's stable. "My fighters," Crispus announced, gesturing expansively. "May I present Lanista Macro of the Ludus Magnus and his prized Gaul." Murmurs rippled through the assembled men. The Ludus Magnus was Rome's premier gladiatorial school, its fighters legendary for both skill and brutality. Macro stepped forward, predatory eyes scanning the gladiators before settling on Kaeso. "I've come to formalize our challenge." His voice carried the refined accent of educated Rome. "My undefeated Gaul against your Samnite, 3 days hence at the Circus Maximus." The Gaul himself remained silent, but his eyes, cold blue in a face scarred by countless battles, conveyed sufficient menace. The red cape draped over his massive shoulders bore dark stains that might have been wine or blood. "The wager has been set," Crispus continued, unable to hide his excitement. 20,000 denarii on the outcome. Doctor whistled softly behind Kaeso, a sum that could purchase an entire provincial estate. "With a special addendum," Macro added, his thin lips curving. "The victor's lanista claims ownership of the defeated fighter, if he survives." Silence fell over the courtyard as implications became clear. This was no ordinary match but a transfer of human property wrapped in
Arena spectacle.
Win or lose, Kaeso's future hung in balance. Crispus clapped his hands, dispelling the tension. "Prepare my champion, Doctor Special Training Regimen. No other duties for Kaeso until the match." As the crowd dispersed, Macro approached Kaeso directly, studying him like a horse at market. "Impressive record. 17 victories. Minimal scarring." His gaze narrowed. "Though I hear you've been distracted recently." "My focus remains on survival," Kaeso replied neutrally. "Wise priority." Macro glanced toward Crispus, now fawning over the Gaul. "Though I wonder if your current master values you appropriately. Under my ownership, talented fighters receive privileges, private quarters, selected companionship, even supervised excursions into the city." The implication hung between them: freedom of movement that would facilitate Kaeso's nocturnal activities. A tempting proposition, if genuine. "Assuming I lose," Kaeso noted. "Assuming you survive," Macro countered smoothly. "My Gaul rarely leaves opponents breathing." After the Lanistas departed, Doctor held Kaeso back from regular training. "This isn't just sport," the veteran warned. "Good eye intense." Macro didn't travel across Rome for entertainment. He wants you specifically. "Why?" "Politics beyond our understanding. His patron is Senator Longinus, the same man arranging marriage to your Valerian girl." Kaeso maintained a neutral expression, though alarm flared within. "My connection to Livia Valeria is transactional only. Save deception for the arena." Doctor's scarred face softened uncharacteristically. "Rumors circulate about theft from Praetor Galba's household. Items connected to the Valerian estate. The timing of Macro's challenge seems convenient." Before Kaeso could respond, a young slave boy approached, offering water. As Kaeso accepted the ladle, the child whispered, "Message from the lady. Evidence delivery arranged. Temple of Jupiter. Midday." Comprehension dawned with chilling clarity. The match against the Gaul was scheduled for the exact time Livia planned to present the ledgers to authorities. Someone, Longinus, Galba, or both, had ensured Kaeso would be fighting for his life precisely when the conspiracy might be exposed. "The Gaul uses a poison blade," Doctor added, unaware of Kaeso's realization. "Not enough to kill immediately, that would displease the crowd. Just enough to slow reflexes, dull senses." Ensuring his perfect record continues, Kaeso concluded grimly. "I've arranged special training this afternoon. Meanwhile, rest." Doctor hesitated, then pressed something into Kaeso's palm. A small vial. "Antidote. Expensive. Use it wisely." Looking down at the vial, Kaeso understood he faced impossible choices. Abandon Livia's plan to focus on survival, or risk death in the arena while evidence of corruption was presented without his protection. Livia stood rigid in Galba's atrium, maintaining the composed demeanor expected of a patrician daughter while her guardian circled her like a predator. Morning light streamed through the compluvium, illuminating the wax tablet bearing the senatorial seal he'd just thrust into her hands. "Your obstinance has exhausted my patience," Galba declared, jowls quivering with barely contained fury. "Items of significant value have disappeared from this household, items pertaining to your father's estate." "How unfortunate," Livia replied, voice deliberately neutral. "Perhaps more diligent guards would serve you better." Galba's face darkened. "You test the limits of my guardianship, girl. Remember that your comfortable existence depends entirely on my goodwill. As does your political standing depend on association with my family name," she countered, careful to maintain a respectful tone despite the defiant words. Further confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Senator Longinus, whose corpulent form filled the doorway. Household slaves rushed to attend him, removing his outer toga and offering refreshments which he accepted with entitled indifference. "Ah, the bride-to-be," Longinus smiled, revealing teeth stained by expensive wine. "I trust Galba has informed you of our accelerated arrangements?" Livia glanced down at the wax tablet in her hands, the formal marriage contract. "I was just being apprised of your eagerness, Senator. The omens favor an immediate union." Longinus settled his bulk onto a couch, helping himself to dried figs from a silver platter. "The Pontifex has confirmed 3 days hence as particularly auspicious." 3 days? Livia couldn't mask her shock. "That's impossible. Proper preparations for a patrician wedding require weeks. My father's memory deserves appropriate observance before." "Your father has been dead nearly a year," Galba interrupted sharply. "Mourning period customs have been satisfied. And I've been more than patient," Longinus added, his affable tone belied by cold eyes. "The marriage contracts are prepared. Your signature and seal are all that remain." Livia studied the tablet, mind racing. The document appeared standard: property transfers, alliance stipulations, household arrangements, until she reached specific clauses regarding her inheritance. "This states all Valerian holdings transfer immediately and completely upon marriage," she noted. "That contravenes Roman law. A wife retains separate property brought into marriage under the sine manu provision." Longinus and Galba exchanged glances. "Such technicalities hardly matter between families of our standing," Longinus dismissed. "Everything will be administered for mutual benefit." "Then you won't object to modifying the contract to reflect proper legal protections?" Livia pressed, heart pounding beneath her calm exterior. Galba stepped forward, snatching the tablet from her hands. "Enough! You are a woman, not a jurist. Your father arranged this match before his death. I merely execute his wishes." "A convenient claim when he's not here to confirm it," Livia observed quietly. The praetor's expression darkened dangerously. "Remember your place, ward. Women who defy their guardians often find themselves declared mentally unsound. The law grants me full authority to manage unstable dependents, including confinement if necessary." The threat hung in the air, its implications chilling. Livia had heard whispers of troublesome women locked away in country estates, administered calming medicines that left them hollow-eyed and compliant. "I meant no disrespect," she retreated strategically. "I simply require time to honor my parents properly before entering matrimony. Perhaps a visit to the temple of Juno to make offerings." Longinus nodded magnanimously. "Piety becomes a Roman matron. You may visit the temple, accompanied by guards, of course." "Of course," Livia agreed, lowering her eyes in feigned submission. An hour later, wrapped in a modest stola and escorted by 2 of Galba's men, Livia approached the temple of Juno on the Capitoline Hill. The guards remained at the entrance as she proceeded inside, where veiled women offered prayers for fertility and marital harmony. Moving between columns to a secluded alcove, she extracted a small scroll from her sleeve and pressed it into the hands of a waiting temple servant, a boy whose older brother served in the household of the urban prefect. "Ensure this reaches your master's hands only," she whispered, pressing a gold coin into his palm. Tell him evidence of corruption affecting Rome's grain supply will be presented at the Temple of Jupiter in 2 days' time. The boy nodded solemnly and disappeared, the scroll concealed in his tunic. Livia turned back toward the temple entrance, resuming the appearance of a dutiful bride-to-be performing religious obligations. The pieces were in motion. Now everything depended on Kaeso's survival in the arena and her own ability to maintain the deception for just 2 more days. Dawn of the combat day broke with somber ceremony at the Ludus. Gladiators prepared for the arena as priests might prepare for sacrifice. Ritual bathing, oiling of skin, solemn meals that might be their last. Kaeso moved through these preparations mechanically, mind divided between immediate survival and the broader conspiracy unfolding across Rome. Crispus had stationed additional guards throughout the Ludus overnight, not to prevent escape, but to protect his investment. The unprecedented wager with Macro had consumed the Lanista's thoughts, making him oblivious to Kaeso's divided attention. The finest armor for my champion, Crispus instructed the armorer, hovering as each piece was selected. The new Samnite breastplate, Iberian greaves, the reinforced helmet. Kaeso accepted the equipment silently. Quality armor might delay death but wouldn't prevent it if the Gaul's weapons carried the poison Doctor had warned about. The small vial of antidote remained concealed in a leather pouch bound against his inner thigh. His one advantage, assuming it worked. As assistants helped secure his armor, Jabari approached under the pretense of offering traditional Numidian fighting prayers. "A boy waits near the cistern," he murmured, head bowed close to Kaeso's. "Says he serves the lady. Urgent message." Kaeso glanced toward the guards, calculating. "Create a distraction. Water shortage complaints." Jabari nodded almost imperceptibly before raising his voice. "The cisterns run dry again. How are men to fight without water?" Other gladiators, sensing opportunity for minor rebellion, quickly joined the manufactured outrage. As guards moved to contain the disturbance, Kaeso slipped away to the water storage area. A thin street child, perhaps 10 years old, waited in shadows. "From the domina?" the boy whispered, pressing a small scroll into Kaeso's palm. "She says plans change. Evidence presented today, not tomorrow. Temple of Jupiter at midday, during your match." Cold realization settled in Kaeso's stomach. Did she send anything else? The boy nodded, extracting a simple iron key from his tunic. "For the North Arena Gate, maintenance entrance. She says a toga awaits in the storage room beyond." An escape route, Kaeso realized. Livia had arranged for him to flee during the match chaos, abandoning his obligation to Crispus, his identity as a gladiator, and any chance of honorable manumission. The implication wasn't lost on him. She valued his life above her promise of legal freedom. "Tell her I understand," Kaeso said, concealing both items in his armor as shouts from the main yard indicated the procession to the arena would soon begin. Returning to the preparation area, he found Doctor waiting alone, the veteran's weathered face grave. "You know this isn't just about fighting." It wasn't a question. "Whatever game you're playing with the Valerian girl involves powerful enemies." Kaeso said nothing, neither confirming nor denying. Doctor sighed. "I've trained hundreds of men. Few had your talent for survival." He hesitated, then pressed something into Kaeso's hand. A small, worn wooden sword, the symbol of manumission, though unofficially given. "Your true fight isn't in the arena." Before Kaeso could respond, Crispus's voice boomed across the yard. "Formation. Procession begins." The journey to the Circus Maximus passed in a blur of noise and color. Rome's citizens lined the streets, cheering the procession of fighters destined to bleed for their entertainment. Normally, Kaeso would have absorbed their energy, using it to focus his mind for combat. Today, his thoughts remained on the Temple of Jupiter, where Livia would risk everything to expose corruption while he faced the Gaul. At the arena's underground holding area, gladiators were sorted into pairs for their matches. Guards with iron gate keys directed each group to separate cells. Kaeso studied their movements, memorizing which guard held the key that would match the copy now hidden in his armor. Through a grated opening, He caught his first clear view of the Gaul preparing across the chamber. The man was massive, yes, but it was his eyes that chilled Kaeso's blood. Flat, emotionless, like a predator viewing prey as merely meat. Around his neck hung a talisman, a small vial similar to the one Kaeso carried, perhaps containing the very poison he would use. "Fighters for the main contest, prepare," called the arena master. As attendants made final adjustments to his armor, Kaeso made his decision. He would neither flee nor simply fight. The evidence and Livia would need protection once presented. The key would serve, but not for escape, for a different purpose entirely. "Gladiators, salute your lanista," came the command. Kaeso raised his gladius toward Crispus one final time, silently vowing it would indeed be the last, regardless of the day's outcome. Sunlight blazed down upon the Circus Maximus as Kaeso stepped onto the sand. 30,000 voices rose in a roar that seemed to physically press against him. The vast oval arena, normally used for chariot races, had been configured for gladiatorial combat with a central fighting area surrounded by temporary barriers. Across the sand stood the Gaul, a mountain of muscle draped in minimal armor that showcased his battle scars. His weapon of choice was unexpected. Not the traditional longsword of his people, but a shorter gladius paired with a small, spiked shield. A fighter who had adapted to Roman techniques while maintaining the raw power of his heritage. "Citizens of Rome," the announcer's voice carried across the arena. "Today we witness a contest of champions. The undefeated Gaul of Lanista Macro against the Samnite of Lanista Crispus." Kaeso scanned the imperial box as the introductions continued. There sat Galba, his corpulent form taking up space meant for two. Beside him, Senator Longinus leaned forward with unusual interest for a man who regularly attended games. No sign of Livia, though Kaeso had expected that she would be at the Temple of Jupiter, presenting evidence that could destroy both men. The realization of how perfectly he'd been maneuvered struck Kaeso with fresh clarity. Whether he lived or died in this arena, Galba and Longinus had ensured he couldn't protect Livia during her most vulnerable moment. "Begin!" The announcer dropped his red cloth. The Gaul wasted no time with ceremonial circling. He charged like a bull, closing the distance with shocking speed for his size. Kaeso sidestepped, deflecting rather than blocking the first powerful strike. The impact still reverberated through his shield arm. Their weapons clashed in quick succession, testing strikes from Kaeso, powerful blows from the Gaul. The crowd's enthusiasm built as they recognized the contrast in styles. Calculated precision against overwhelming force. 10 minutes into the match, neither had drawn significant blood. The Gaul's frustration manifested in increasingly aggressive attacks. Kaeso maintained disciplined defense, conserving energy while studying his opponent's patterns. "Fight, coward!" the Gaul growled in accented Latin, the first words he'd spoken. Kaeso responded with a lightning-fast combination. Shield bash followed by a thrust that slipped past the Gaul's defense, drawing first blood across his ribs. The crowd erupted in approval. The Gaul's expression shifted from frustration to cold calculation. His next attack sequence changed rhythm mid-execution, a veteran's tactic. Kaeso recognized the feint too late. The Gaul's gladius sliced across his forearm, opening a shallow but precise wound. Almost immediately, Kaeso felt it, an unnatural burning sensation spreading from the cut. His suspicions confirmed. The blade was poisoned. He had minutes before his reflexes would begin to dull. Fighting through the initial shock, Kaeso pressed forward with renewed urgency. He needed to create distance and time to use the antidote. A series of aggressive attacks drove the Gaul back momentarily, allowing Kaeso to retreat to the arena's edge. As he caught his breath, his gaze swept the crowd again, and froze. Near the eastern entrance, surrounded by guards in praetor's livery, stood Livia. Her face was pale but composed, her eyes locked on him rather than the Gaul. Behind her, a thin, elderly senator he recognized as Publius Rutilius, known for his incorruptible reputation. Understanding crashed through Kaeso's mind. The evidence presentation hadn't happened at the temple. It was happening here in the arena, before all of Rome's influential citizens. Livia had changed the plan entirely. The momentary distraction nearly proved fatal. The Gaul charged again, his shield catching Kaeso in the chest and sending him sprawling onto the sand. The crowd gasped collectively as the massive fighter raised his gladius for a potentially killing blow. Kaeso rolled, the weapon striking sand inches from his head. He scrambled to his feet, aware of growing numbness in his wounded arm. No time remained for subtlety. While circling to reset their positions, he reached beneath his armor to the concealed pouch, extracting the vial of antidote. In one fluid motion, practiced during sleepless nights, he drained the bitter liquid while deflecting another strike. The Gaul's eyes narrowed, recognizing what Kaeso had done. "That won't save you," he snarled, reaching for a second, smaller blade hidden in his belt. A poisoned dagger, the true weapon he'd been waiting to use. As they circled each other once more, Kaeso felt strength returning to his limbs. Across the arena, Livia had moved closer to the imperial box, the elderly senator at her side, a scroll visible in her hands. The true battle was about to begin on two fronts simultaneously. The Gaul's poisoned dagger slashed through air where Kaeso had stood a heartbeat earlier. The antidote coursed through his veins, burning away the poison's effects, though not without cost. His heart raced unnaturally, vision sharpening to painful clarity as if seeing through water. "Two blades," Kaeso taunted, circling. "One not enough for the mighty Gaul?" The crowd, sensing the shift in dynamics, roared their approval. Romans appreciated both bloodshed and theater. Now they were receiving both. The Gaul attacked with renewed fury, both weapons moving in lethal arcs. Kaeso abandoned traditional Samnite tactics, switching to a fluid defensive style he'd observed in Eastern fighters. The unexpected change disrupted the Gaul's rhythm. In the imperial box, Kaeso glimpsed Galba rising to his feet, face contorted with alarm. The praetor's attention wasn't on the match but on the approaching figures of Livia and Senator Rutilius, who now stood at the box's entrance, guards deferentially making way for the venerable elder statesman. Kaeso needed to end this fight, not just survive it. When the Gaul lunged again, Kaeso executed the maneuver he'd been setting up for minutes. Instead of retreating, he stepped into the attack, catching the Gaul's sword arm while simultaneously sweeping the larger man's leg. The momentum of the Gaul's charge did the rest, sending him crashing face first into the sand. Before his opponent could recover, Kaeso planted his foot on the Gaul's weapon hand and pressed his gladius against the man's neck. The arena fell silent, all eyes on the undefeated champion now at Kaeso's mercy. The match editor rose, prepared to signal judgment, when chaos erupted in the imperial box. "Citizens of Rome," Senator Rutilius's voice, strengthened by decades of oratory in the Senate, carried across the hushed arena. He held aloft a bronze scroll case. "A grave matter of public corruption demands attention." Beside him, Livia stood composed but resolute, her patrician bearing lending credibility to the interruption. Guards moved uncertainly, caught between conflicting chains of command. In that moment of distraction, Crispus rushed to the arena's edge. "Finish him," he hissed at Kaeso. "Claim your victory." Kaeso looked down at the Gaul, seeing not a faceless enemy but another man trapped in the same system of ownership and exploitation. Instead of delivering the killing strike, he withdrew his blade and extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, the Gaul accepted it, rising to stunned silence from the crowd. Such mercy was rare enough to be remarkable. "He fought with honor," Kaeso announced loudly, raising his opponent's arm alongside his own. The crowd, ever fickle, erupted in approval at this unexpected display of Roman virtus. As the cheers swelled, Kaeso turned toward the imperial box where true combat now unfolded. "This man is a thief," Galba shouted, pointing at Kaeso. "He stole valuable property from a praetor's household. Arrest him immediately." Guards moved toward the arena floor, but halted when Senator Rutilius raised his hand. "Interesting accusation," the elderly senator replied calmly, "when the items in question were themselves stolen from their rightful owner." He gestured to Livia. "The Lady Valeria has presented evidence that her guardian, Praetor Galba, and his associate Senator Longinus have systematically embezzled from the public grain supply while using her father's records to conceal their actions. The crowd's murmuring grew as Romans processed this claim. Corruption affecting their bread supply struck at the heart of public interest. Longinus rose, face purple with rage. Outrageous slander. This woman is mentally unsound. Her guardian has documentation of her instability. Documentation conveniently produced after she questioned financial irregularities? Rutilius countered, opening the scroll case. These ledgers tell a different story, one of systematic theft from Roman citizens. In the arena, Kaeso noted guards loyal to the urban prefect entering through multiple gates, not to arrest him but to secure the imperial box. The prefect himself, distinguished by his ceremonial axe and toga, approached with grim determination. By authority of the emperor, the prefect's voice resonated. Praetor Galba and Senator Longinus will surrender themselves for questioning regarding these accusations. Galba's face contorted between rage and fear. This is a conspiracy. The Gladiator. He's her accomplice. They fabricated everything. Livia stepped forward, her clear voice carrying across the now silent arena. The evidence speaks for itself, as does my father's death. Not from fever, but from poison, when he discovered your corruption. The accusation landed like a physical blow. Spectators who had come for entertainment now witnessed a different kind of Roman spectacle, justice in its rawest form. The Forum Romanum buzzed with unprecedented activity as temporary tribunal benches were arranged before the Temple of Saturn. What had begun as arena spectacle had transformed into public judiciary proceedings. Rome's elite citizens crowding to witness the extraordinary hearing. Kaeso stood to one side, still in his arena garb minus weapons. Technically a prisoner but treated with cautious respect by the urban prefect's guards. Beside him, Livia maintained the dignified composure of her patrician upbringing, though the slight tremor in her clasped hands betrayed her tension. A bold strategy, Kaeso murmured. The temple would have allowed them to control access. The arena forced public accountability. Rome runs on spectacle, she replied softly. I merely provided one they couldn't ignore. Senator Rutilius approached, leaning on his walking staff. Age had bent his frame but not his resolve. The magistrates are prepared. The evidence is compelling, but be warned, cornered wolves bite fiercely. 3 magistrates took their positions, grave-faced men whose judicial authority temporarily superseded even a praetor's imperium. Between them sat the ivory gavel, symbol of Rome's commitment to law above individuals, regardless of rank. Galba and Longinus were escorted to the defendant's bench, no longer in senatorial regalia but simple white togas signifying their status as citizens under judgment. Behind them stood Macro, the lanista, similarly detained for his role in the poison weapons scheme. The senior magistrate struck his gavel, silencing the murmuring crowd. This tribunal will examine evidence of corruption in the public grain supply, improper guardianship, and potential conspiracy in the death of Marcus Valerius Corvus. The ledgers were presented first, with court scribes explaining the discrepancies documented in the margins. Shipments recorded at full measure while actually delivered at partial quantities, with differences pocketed by conspirators. 3,000 modii missing from each Egyptian shipment, the scribe detailed, multiplied across dozens of deliveries, enough grain to feed several legions for a year, or to sell at inflated prices during manufactured shortages. Naivia was called next, granted temporary immunity to testify about household matters. She spoke clearly despite obvious fear, describing conversations overheard between Galba and Longinus regarding eliminating problems and ensuring the Valerian records remained controlled. They spoke of fever that would seem natural, she testified, eyes downcast. Later that same week, my master fell ill suddenly, though he had been in perfect health. Galba's defense relied heavily on his authority and indignation. These are fabrications from disgruntled servants and an unstable ward. I have documentation from 3 physicians attesting to Valerius's declining health before his death. Physicians in your financial debt, Senator Rutilius countered, producing records from his own investigation. When Longinus spoke, his approach was more measured. acknowledging grain discrepancies but attributing them to administrative oversights rather than deliberate theft. In managing Rome's complex supply chain, errors occur. To characterize them as criminal conspiracy is politically motivated slander. The magistrates called for Kaeso's testimony next. He stepped forward, conscious of the unusual spectacle he presented, a gladiator addressing Rome's judicial elite as an equal. I was commissioned by the Lady Valeria to recover family property unlawfully held by her guardian, he stated simply. In doing so, I discovered documents suggesting broader corruption. My observations corroborate the evidence before you. And we should trust the word of a gladiator? Galba sneered. A man who fights for others' entertainment? A thief caught in the act. A man who chose justice over freedom. Livia interjected, stepping forward unbidden. When he could have fled with the evidence and valuables, he chose to ensure truth would prevail. The senior magistrate raised his hand for silence. One final witness. To the shock of the assembly, Alaric the Germanic guard entered, his massive frame drawing all eyes. He approached the tribunal with steady determination. I served Marcus Valerius faithfully for 15 years, he stated in accented Latin. The night before his sudden illness, I observed Galba adding powder to my master's wine. When I confronted him afterward, he offered wealth and position for my silence. Galba lunged to his feet. Lies. All lies. The same powder was found in your quarters during today's search, the urban prefect announced gravely. The physician confirms it causes symptoms identical to those that killed Valerius. As the final pieces aligned, the crowd's mood shifted palpably. What had begun as entertaining scandal hardened into collective outrage. Corruption might be commonplace in Rome, but the deliberate murder of a respected patrician and theft from the sacred grain supply crossed boundaries that even the jaded capital found unforgivable. The senior magistrate lifted the ivory gavel, his expression solemn with the weight of judgment about to be rendered. 7 days. After the tribunal, Kaeso found himself back in Crispus's ludus, though everything had changed. The Lanista's attitude had transformed from ownership to obsequious respect. A gladiator who had helped bring down a praetor and senator was no ordinary property. The urban prefect himself commended your actions, Crispus reminded Kaeso for perhaps the dozenth time, hovering as Kaeso gathered his few possessions. Such recognition brings honor to my humble establishment. What remained unspoken was the true reason for Crispus's newfound cordiality. Fear. The tribunal's judgment had been swift and severe. Galba and Longinus faced exile to separate barren islands, their properties confiscated, names struck from Senate rolls. Macro had lost his gladiatorial school, charged with attempted murder for the poison weapons. Anyone associated with the conspiracy scrambled to distance themselves. Your freedom can be arranged, Crispus continued, fingering the hem of his expensive new tunic. For a reasonable sum, of course. The legal process of manumission requires certain expenses. How reasonable? Kaeso asked, well aware that a gladiator's price typically far exceeded anything they could hope to accumulate in a lifetime. Crispus named a figure that, while substantial, was shockingly lower than the customary amount. Before Kaeso could respond, a slave announced visitors at the ludus gate. Livia entered the Spartan cell, accompanied by a court scribe. Her simple stola belied her restored status. The Valerian properties and assets had been returned to her sole control by special decree. Lanista Crispus, she acknowledged with cool formality. I've come to discuss terms for Kaeso's manumission. Crispus bowed deeply, suddenly deferential. Most honored lady, we were just discussing that very matter. Given the special circumstances, I'm familiar with the customary price for a champion gladiator, Livia interrupted, gesturing to the scribe who unrolled an official-looking document. I've prepared standard manumission papers with appropriate compensation. What followed was a delicate negotiation disguised as polite conversation. Crispus, eager to align himself with the victorious party, accepted terms far below what he might have demanded weeks earlier. Signatures were exchanged, witnesses noted, and coin transferred. The ceremony will take place tomorrow before the urban praetor, the scribe informed them, sealing the documents with wax impressions, as required by law. When Crispus and the scribe departed to complete the administrative requirements, Livia and Kaeso were left alone in the cell that had been his home for 5 years. "You paid considerably less than my market value," Kaeso observed. "Crispus fears association with the condemned conspirators. Besides, your value was never accurately measured by the arena's standards." Her eyes met his directly. "You fulfilled your part of our bargain with honor. I do the same." A moment of awkward silence stretched between them. The transaction completed, yet something unresolved lingering in the air. "What becomes of you now?" Kaeso finally asked. "I inherit my father's responsibilities along with his assets. The grain supply contracts will require management." She hesitated. "And you? What does a free man do after 5 years in the arena?" The question had haunted Kaeso's sleepless nights. "You mentioned information about my sister." Livia nodded. "As promised, she was sold to a merchant's household in Neapolis. Still alive, according to my sources." Hope flickered in Kaeso's chest, a possibility he had scarcely allowed himself to consider. "Then perhaps Neapolis is my destination." A long journey for a newly freed man with limited resources. The implication hung between them, neither willing to articulate the obvious solution. The following day, beneath the imposing columns of the Basilica Julia, Kaeso knelt before the urban praetor. The ceremony of manumission was brief but significant, the formal turning of the body that transformed a man from property to citizen. "By the power vested in me by the Senate and people of Rome," the praetor intoned, "I confirm your transition to liberty." The symbolic tap of the rod against Kaeso's shoulder, followed by the presentation of the wooden sword, the rudis that signified a gladiator's earned freedom. As Kaeso rose, no longer kneeling before Roman authority but standing as its equal under law, the weight of the moment nearly overwhelmed him. 5 years of blood and sand, of survival measured in heartbeats, of identity defined by others' entertainment, ended with a simple ceremonial gesture. Crispus, playing his part with theatrical flourish, proclaimed loudly, "May the gods witness, this man is free." The small gathering of witnesses applauded politely. Among them stood Livia, her expression a complex mixture of satisfaction and uncertainty. As their eyes met across the basilica's marble floor, the question that had been left unspoken in the ludus cell still hung between them. What price would freedom truly demand, and what shape would it take for two people from worlds that were never meant to intersect? 1 month after the tribunal that had shaken Rome's political foundations, the Valerian domus on the Palatine Hill had reclaimed its former dignity. Livia had dismissed Galba's corrupt staff, replacing them with trusted servants. The atrium fountain burbled peacefully as evening shadows lengthened across the peristyle garden. Kaeso entered not through hidden passages or under cover of darkness, but through the main entrance, a formal visitor announced by the doorkeeper. His appearance had transformed. Gone was the gladiator's utilitarian attire, replaced by the simple but respectable tunic of a Roman citizen. The only visible remnant of his arena days was the distinctive scarring on his forearms and the watchful alertness that never quite left his eyes. "The lady awaits you in the garden," the steward informed him, leading the way through the atrium. Livia sat beside a small fountain, reviewing scrolls spread across a marble table. She wore a deep blue stola that complemented her olive complexion, her dark hair arranged in the modest style of a patrician woman managing household affairs rather than seeking attention. "My security advisor arrives punctually as always," she observed, setting aside her work. The title was a careful fiction that allowed regular visits without scandalizing Rome's gossips. As her client, a free man under her formal patronage, Kaeso's presence could be explained through legitimate business. That their business often extended into lengthy conversations about philosophy, history, and personal experiences remained private. "The perimeter wall modifications are complete," he reported, maintaining the pretense initially. "Your new guards have been thoroughly vetted and positioned according to my recommendations." "Excellent." She gestured to the bench across from her. "Wine." As the steward poured and then discreetly withdrew, the formal facade between them softened slightly. "News from Neapolis," Kaeso said once they were alone. My sister Kasia was indeed sold to the merchant Tullius, as your sources indicated. She's now married to his shipping clerk, a freeman with a growing business. You'll visit her soon? Livia asked. The messenger carries my letter. I'll wait for her response before intruding on her new life. A shadow crossed his features. She may not welcome reminders of our past. Family is family, regardless of circumstance. Livia's voice carried the weight of one who understood loss intimately. The passage of time changes perspectives. They sipped wine in comfortable silence as twilight deepened around them. Somewhere in the distance, temple bells marked the evening hour. The Senate confirmed your appointment to manage your father's grain contracts, Kaeso noted. Unusual for a woman to hold such responsibility. Unusual times create unusual precedents. She smiled faintly. Several senators who opposed a woman's involvement suddenly remembered urgent business in their provincial holdings after the tribunal. Another comfortable silence stretched between them. Their relationship existed in an undefined space, beyond the transactional agreement that had first connected them, yet constrained by Rome's rigid social boundaries. I leave for Ostia tomorrow, Livia finally said. The Egyptian grain ships arrive within the week. As contract holder, I must personally oversee the accounting. A journey requiring appropriate security, Kaeso observed. Indeed. Her eyes met his directly. Would you accompany me? Not as a guard, but as my advisor. There are matters of trust that few in Rome have earned. The invitation represented more than a business arrangement. It acknowledged a partnership that defied conventional categorization. From his belt pouch, Kaeso withdrew a simple object and placed it on the table between them. A plain iron ring, unadorned by gems or elaborate craftsmanship. A curious gift, Livia remarked, lifting it to examine in the fading light. Among my people, before Rome conquered us, such rings were exchanged as promises. His voice remained steady though his heart raced. Not marriage. Rome's laws make that complicated between our stations, but a commitment nonetheless. And what does this promise entail? She asked softly. That some treasures are worth more than gold or jewels. That freedom means little without purpose. He met her gaze directly. That hearts once closed can learn to open again. Livia held the ring, her expression unreadable in the gathering dusk. Then, deliberately, she slipped it onto her finger. You fulfilled your first challenge admirably, recovering my family treasures. Her voice carried a warmth previously guarded. And it seems you've succeeded in the second as well. Which was? Stealing my heart? She replied simply. Though perhaps it wasn't theft but a fair exchange. As night settled over the eternal city, two people from worlds that should never have intersected sat together in a garden, contemplating a future neither had imagined possible. Beyond the villa walls, Rome continued its ancient rhythms, indifferent to individual destinies, yet somehow changed by their unlikely alliance.